What is the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced while home alone? I have been pretty fortunate based on these comments, but I was home alone one night while my wife and son were visiting my mill. I walked back to our bedroom to see someone rummaging through my son's room on the video baby monitor. Immediately grabbed my firearm and yelled to the other side of the house, "I am armed. Come out slowly." Over and over while slowly making my way back to his room. Got there, flipped on the light and nothing. Searched the whole house, pumped full of adrenaline. Finally satisfied I was alone, I went back to my room and the guy was back in the room. I took a closer look and I am ashamed to say I was looking at myself. The camera is a live feed on our Wi-Fi and it was steaming on a huge delay. I have never known it to do that and it has not done it since. Somebody tried to break into the house while I was by myself. The whole place was quiet and dark at nighttime. I walked past the front door to go upstairs for bed, and the handle suddenly started jerking around like the Hulk was trying to get in. Then whoever it was started to either kick or shoulder the door, and it was making the whole frame jiggle. I completely froze and my mind went blank. Just standing there like an idiot and staring. My dog bolted down the stairs like it was her time to shine, scrambled on the tile, and let loose the most vicious barks I've ever heard. Whoever it was left. She was a very good girl. I miss her. I was chilling on the couch, doing whatever, when suddenly a really heavy person starts sprinting in our attic. Sounded like steel-toed boots and everything. I'm a really small woman, so I immediately freaked out, thinking there's a gigantic man stomping around my home. Then the screaming starts. Literal screaming, like something from The Exorcist, and there's multiple voices. I sneaked outside and cried, extremely shaken, and called the cops. Guess what's in my attic? Not a big rapist, no. Raccoons. Also, the raccoons were mating. That's what the screaming came from. I bawled to the cops about horny raccoons. When I was young, I came home from a party in the middle of the night, when my dad were out of town. I started making a midnight quesadilla when I heard someone cough in the basement. I yelled and ran outside, and they took off through the backyard. Come to find out, my dad's ex-GF's daughter stole her key to our house and came to rob us. She was busted a couple years later doing this to her still. I was about 21 or 22 and living by myself at the time, and I left my window open on a pleasant night. It was low enough to the ground that you could get in if you really tried, but the screen wasn't easy to take off and I lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, so I didn't even think twice about it. Woke up in the middle of the night because I smelled smoke, and I reached out to turn on my lamp and my hand hit what was very obviously a person. My brain fully woke up at that point, and I realized there was a shirtless man in my bedroom, smoking a cigarette and staring at me. I remember yelling for him to get out, and I must have spooked him just as badly as he spooked me because he leapt out my window and took off. I slammed it shut and moved a bookcase in front of it, and when I went out the next morning in the daylight found the screen sitting against the house. Didn't sleep the rest of the night, and I haven't slept with the window more than cracked ever since. I also absolutely refuse to live on the ground floor of a building. I don't know if he was planning to rob me or rape me or both, but it was absolutely terrifying and makes me wonder how many times it happened and I didn't wake up. A few years back I was home alone during a power storm. I went into the bathroom to take a dump and at the exact time I was shitting I sneezed. Well, the power went out as well. The house was pitch black and I literally thought I SHD myself blind. I couldn't see my hands, so in a panic I was yelling, "No, this cannot be true." I was in a panic feeling for the toilet paper to wipe and flush. After completing the task, I just sat on the toilet trying to figure out how to tell everyone I know that I literally SHD myself blind by sneezing while shitting. After about 2 minutes of complete darkness and dread and panic, lightning struck outside and lit up my hallway. Best feeling ever. Edit. Thank you to everyone for the awards and comments. I told this story to a few friends one night about 3 years ago and they laughed quite hard and still joke with me about it. When the question came up on here, scary in the sense most people responded never popped in my mind, but shitting myself blind did. Once again, thank you all. One evening an explosion at a petrochemical plant, located a mile from my house, blew out the double window in my living room while I was in the room. I definitely thought we were being bombed until I remembered where I live. I had just let my dog out to the backyard and he was completely traumatized. For the following 2 months I had to carry him outside and sit in the grass with pieces of chicken just so he would potty. Not exactly alone. But I was home with my newborn son and someone knocked on the front door. I was expecting my mother, but she usually comes in through the garage. I thought it was strange, but yelled come in. Because why wouldn't I? Then this cracked out old woman comes stumbling through the door, and asks me for a ride to the nearest gas station. I told her I didn't have a car seat for my son so I couldn't go anywhere, so she starts screaming that's just inappropriate. And doesn't stop even when I'm telling her she needs to leave or I'll call the cops. After a minute or so, my mother actually pulls in the driveway, the crackhead sees the car and bolts back out the door, and I never see her again. That night my truck got broken into. Can't for sure say it was the same woman, but I have her description to the cops anyway. When I was 19 in my first apartment I had someone knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw this burly, heavy-set man who abruptly started screaming to let him in. He was screaming things like he was going to beat my ass, and kick the door down if I didn't open. I called the cops and as soon as someone got on the phone he started body slamming my door to break in. I was freaking out and crying as they quickly had 5 cops show up within 5+ minutes. As soon as he heard the sirens he quickly walked away and they met him at the bottom of the stairs. Apparently he was after the previous renter but was extremely intoxicated. They arrested him and thankfully he never came back. I ended up breaking my lease and moving out 3 months later. It was in a very nice neighborhood but it quickly made me wish I was back home with family instead of being on the other side of the United States. I lit 2 long taper candles for some ambience while I was playing guitar late at night. I was facing the other direction looking out the window while playing and shortly later turned around and went back towards the candles and discovered one of them was completely gone. The stand was still there, but no melted wax, just a bare candle holder, and the other one was still lit and no shorter than it was when I lit them. It was almost 3 a.m. and I was so terrified that I got in my car and left and drove to my dad's house. When I was like 14, I was home alone one night around 10 p.m. stood in my kitchen making some cereal. It's dark outside and then all of a sudden the loudest sound. Some drunk woman literally launched a hammer through my kitchen window. Was so loud and glass was everywhere. I followed her down the street whilst calling the police. Pretty strange. Added for everyone asking why I followed, so the reason I actually followed her was because you could see really clearly through the smashed window as it was now wide open. She looked like a very fragile little old crackhead lady that could barely walk or see straight, and she started stumbling away mumbling some shit once she had done it. Plus I didn't really know how I was gonna explain this shit to my parents if I didn't have a solid answer, haha. But yes, it was a very distressed walk whilst following her. Definitely an action caused by adrenaline too. One afternoon someone knocked at my back door. I thought it was the guy coming to read our meter, so I opened the door. Next thing I know, 2 huge guys pushed into the house, and one of them threw me up against the wall. Then they shoved me down on the couch. They told me they were Hell's Angels, and they were pissed because my BF was selling too much drugs, cutting into their profits. They kept calling me by my next door neighbor's name. We had suspected they were selling drugs. All of the people stopping by for less than 5 minutes made it pretty obvious. I just kept telling them I wasn't her. One of them searched the house, while the other kept me pinned to the couch. They started to realize they were in the wrong house, because they couldn't find anything where they were told it was. My neighbor's house is a single floor, with a basement. My house is a 4-level, backsplit. Then I showed them my mail, because it showed my name, and they knew they messed up. They started telling me that they were after my neighbor's BF, because he raped their cousin. Which I knew was BS, but I didn't care, I just wanted them to leave. They robbed me of my cash, and left. I now have locks on my screen doors. I was asleep at home alone. When I turned over in bed, I casually opened my eyes a little whilst turning and they were shut again just as quickly. In that split second, I could have sworn I had seen a man stood at the bottom of my bed. I laid still, awake with my eyes closed, trying not to act like I was awake and trying to listen for any sound in the room of someone breathing or moving. Couldn't hear anything. I was too scared to open my eyes and look, consoled myself that there wasn't any way someone could have gotten in without me hearing a window smash and fell back asleep. When I got up in the morning though the front door was open. They didn't take anything and left no signs of being there. Was still very creepy though. This happened to me a couple of years ago. I have also lived on my own a long time, so do not get sacred easily. I had just finished reading in bed and I turned my lamp off and settled down to go to sleep and hugged my cat up close to me. This would be about 1:30 in the morning. I closed my eyes and I had a voice say meow like imitating a cat. My window was open, so although it was just someone being weird outside, I opened my eyes and in the middle of my bedroom was a small boy wearing a red jumper waving his arm above his head. I leapt up like a ninja and put the light on. And my heart was going mad. Now, nothing paranormal has happened in this house, ever in the entire time I have lived here. I spent the whole night totally freaked out, only getting a bit of sleep when it started to get light outside. My friends thought this was hilarious when I told them. I was saying there is no way I'm living in a haunted house and started googling cleansing, exorcists and whatnot. The next few nights other weird stuff started happening. I started sleeping with the TV on, and as soon as I tried to get any sleep, I would hear freaky voices coming from it, or I would notice shadows dip by the side of my bed. It was dreadful. I actually resorted to saying out loud, "I'm really tired, so if you could not haunt me for one night I would be really grateful." I had never really believed in any of this sort of stuff before, so it was like an entire paradigm shift for me. Anyway, I was going on about this to my friends at work, and one of them asked if I was on drugs. Well, funnily enough, I had just started taking this new tablet Montelukast for my asthma. When I got home, read the side effects, a rare one being hallucinations. Stop taking them, no more hauntings. Update. Thanks everyone for all your replies. I woke up to so many notifications on my phone. I did some research myself after I realized what was happening, and I found out that it was prescribed mainly to children and to those who struggle with taking an inhaler, here in the UK at least. My asthma was going through a bad patch, so they tried a few different meds on me. I remember thinking, if you were a little kid and started seeing stuff like that every night and had no idea that it was the tablets causing it, the thought doesn't bear thinking about. Also, nothing has ever happened in my house since then. Everything is completely normal and I now can sleep with the lights off like a proper adult. Got a 5-channel sound system. Nothing too fancy, but the best I'd ever had. Watched an action film and heard a creaking door to my left in the distance. I had to clear my home as I thought there was an intruder. Nope, just better stereo sound. Edit, it's a 5.1 system. The two behind me cause all the problems. They are oriented towards the outside of my house. Sorry for any confusion in my lack of terminology. I had the police knock one day while I was alone. The cop had a guy in the back of his car who said we were holding his friend captive. I showed the cop my ID and explained that it was just me and my husband. He wasn't home but they could look if they wanted to, and he said no, that was okay, and then asked questions about my neighbors. My BF worked away from home a lot and I always struggled to sleep on the first night he was away. On this occasion I was woken by the sound of a man shouting and then someone banging on wood or a front door. I jumped up and looked out my bedroom window. Just in time to see a man dressed all in black walking through a garden towards the house. I ran to the front of the house to look out of the front window and make sure he kept going. He did, but he met up with another man dressed in black walking towards my house. I was terrified and called the police. They arrived in a matter of minutes and checked out the back garden, but they were gone. Turned out a neighbor had caught them both trying to steal his car, and one had escaped through the gardens while the other had run through the roads, and they had met up outside my house. I didn't sleep at all that night and my brother came to stay the next night. I'm so glad I live in an apartment now, much more security. You know those tongs in the kitchen that have a spring but a latch to keep them together? I had a pair of those and I put the latch on and put them down on the counter. I went away for a bit and came back and then they jumped off the counter at me. Biggest jump scare of my life. The latch had come undone and they sprung open, but in the millisecond when inanimate objects suddenly come to life and jump at you, you don't realize this and totally freak out. I work from home, so I'm home alone a lot. One day I was working, and out of the corner of my eye I noticed some movement in my backyard. There was a man jumping over my fence into my backyard. Panicked, I call my then boyfriend, now fiancé, and tell him what is happening. While I'm on the phone with him, I get a knock at my front door. It's a woman from CenturyLink informing me that technicians will need access to my backyard. I tell her someone just jumped over my fence, so I think they're already there. Way to give me a heart attack, CenturyLink. I was living alone after my ex-husband moved out, and the creepy guy across the street who was 20 years older and enjoyed drugs kept trying to date me. He would harass me when I left my house or arrived home and would threaten to rape me. I had just started dating my current BF and he helped hang up motion detecting lights outside. I started carrying pepper spray and leaving the alarm on whenever I was home. My BF and I also agreed that if I didn't text him for a certain period of time and he couldn't get a hold of me, that he'd go to my house and check on things. I also ceased him on my work calendar just in case. It got so scary that my BF actually moved in a lot sooner than we planned because I felt so unsafe. After creepy guy watched my BF move in and saw him puttering around with project cars in the driveway, he stopped harassing me and moved away a few months later. I've never felt so unsafe in my own home, wondering if the outside lights were on because of the neighbor's cat or because creepy guy was trying to break in. One night I was home alone grillin' and chillin'. Drinking beer and smoking dope, about half lit. Wearing my hoe clothes. It was a great time. As soon as I sat down to eat, I heard a woman yelling for help and pounding on doors. Once I realized she wasn't a threat to me, I sprinted up the road to find her. She was covered in blood and told me her husband was trapped in the truck he flipped. She kept trying to get me to help her pull him out of the truck and I said, "Lady, I know this is an emergency but I ain't no EMT." The worst part was I live in the woods with no cell service. But luckily I was able to get to my landlord's attention so he could call 911 from the landline. I was up until 3 a.m. that night because I could not wind down after the fact. Everyone survived and the guy got out on his own, but it was the scariest night of my life. Nothing quite that terrifying yet, PLS age well, but once I left all the bathroom windows open wide by mistake when it was very windy and I woke up in the middle of the night to the bathroom door slamming open and shut and felt like I was gonna piss myself with fright. I stayed in bed like I was paralyzed and I could feel this cool breeze coming into my room, all the cold air being let in. Lol. I prayed to whoever above to remove who or whatever it was from my home and asked for my life to be spared. I got under the covers and called my aunt and asked her to come over as she had a spare key and she did. Her and her husband came with weapons and charged upstairs into the bathroom. No fear. They realized it was the wind pushing the door around. I still stayed with her that night. Lol. Skeptical. Sleep paralysis. Waking up from a nightmare soaked in sweat, with a weight on my chest and completely unable to move. Sometimes I see shadowy shapes or feel there's someone watching. One night I was watching The Conjuring at home with my little sister when we heard someone putting a key into our front door and opening it. We were sitting in the living room next to a sliding door that was very close to the front door, so we both heard it very clearly. Now this didn't alarm us since we knew our dad had recently gone out to get some stuff, so we just assumed he had returned. "Dad, you're back already?" I casually asked. There was no response. "Dad?" I asked again, thinking that he had not heard me the first time. Again. Silence. At this point I get the feeling that something isn't quite right and I could tell by the look on my sister's face that she was quite nervous as well. I'll note that up to this point she had spent the evening rolling her eyes at horror movie cliches and she very rarely gets scared. We looked at each other for a moment wondering what we should do before we started hearing a few more scattering sounds from right outside the sliding door. I was frozen in fear by this stage. I tried one more time in a louder, but shakier voice. "Dad, is that you? Please respond, please respond." Repeated in my head. But the silence continued. Now at this point I'm freaking out and I literally jumped off the couch. My sister also abruptly gets up and starts rapidly walking towards the other end of the room, which leads to the kitchen area. She later revealed to me that she was planning on grabbing a knife. She had this horrified look on her face that I hadn't seen before. We looked at each other in nervous silence. I didn't really know what to do and I didn't want to make any further sounds. I finally decided to walk up to the sliding door and began opening it as slowly as possible, peering into the darkness. I know, I literally became the idiot who investigates the unknown. Creepy noise without anything to protect myself with. When the door was finally open wide enough, I poked my head out and scanned the corridor, preparing for the worst. To my surprise, there was no one there. But what was more strange was that the front door was still completely shut. We never heard the door close. My sister and I were obviously both extremely relieved as we were almost certain that there was an intruder in the house. After this, I immediately went to go ask my mom, who was situated in her bedroom at the other end of our house, if it was her or whether she had noticed anything. She told me that she thought my dad had come home as well, as she also heard someone opening the front door. Around half an hour later, which felt like an eternity at the time as we still quite shaken from the incident, my dad finally arrived home and confirmed that he had not come home earlier. To this day my sister and I still have no idea what happened that night. One day while I was working afternoons a couple years back, I woke up at around 10 a.m. and started to watch American Dad before getting up. Next thing you know, I hear my back door open. A normal thing in our home since we only use the back door. But no one was supposed to be home yet. I assumed it was my mom and didn't think anything of it. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs as my bedroom was on the second floor. I call out to my mom and get no response. Then my door cracks open and a head pops in. It's a 30-ish-year-old man with a blonde beard and a big mane of greasy hair who looks shocked to see me. At the time I was about 260 pounds 6'3" and 20 years old. I was also sitting in only my boxers. Before I was able to realize what was happening, he asked, "Is this the _ residence?" To which I reply, "No." He makes a swift exit and before I can recollect my thoughts, he's not even in my driveway. Talked to a family friend who is a veteran police officer. Turns out a man has been pulling this kind of stunt to rob people in nearby towns. I was home for the weekend from uni, but my parents and siblings were away, so was home alone. Our house is quite secluded, with a church and graveyard next door and closest neighbors up the street but quite a bit away. I had all the doors locked and was settling down to watch a movie when the doorbell starts to ring, so I go to answer it. No one there. Then the back doorbell rings. No one there again. This keeps happening over and over, and it is pitch black outside. Then whoever it was began banging on windows and yelling. At this point I'm freaking out, so I begin to call the police and yell at the people outside that I've called them, when it turns out it was a couple of fellas from uni playing a prank on me. I was terrified and reduced to tears at this point, but they thought it was hilarious. They did a few more things like that to me over the 2 to 3 years I was at uni with them, and I always thought they were my friends. A few years ago I was home alone in my basement playing video games when I hear the door that connects my kitchen to the garage creak open and slam shut, but I never heard the actual mechanical garage door open. Then I heard heavy footsteps of someone wearing boots walk the length of my kitchen directly above me. I originally thought, oh, my brother must have forgotten something, as he had left about 5 minutes before that for work, so I was about to yell up to him to make fun of him, but something in the back of my mind was telling me, hold on, something's not right here. So I muted my TV to both hear better and to stay quiet. Then I heard the footsteps turn around and walk back to the door, and again I hear it creak open and slam shut. But again I never heard the actual mechanical garage door open or close. So I slowly walk upstairs thinking maybe my brother just forgot to close the garage door. I slowly open the door to my garage and see that the garage door has been closed the entire time. The only two explanations I can come up with are either something paranormal happened, or someone broke into my house, walked through my kitchen and left without taking anything, while also not letting me hear them open my garage door. In my opinion, both are equally terrifying to me. I get auditory hallucinations when I'm tired. That's brought on by my anxiety. The one that caused the worst anxiety attack it had in months was just as I was drifting off to sleep, a guy yelled "Hey" right into my ear, and I launched myself out of bed before realizing what had happened. I was 13 and my dad was at work, and my little sister, then 8, was at my Gram's house. My dad and my older sister, then 16, had recently stolen back her dog, the sweetest Aussie Shepherd mix you ever met, from the guy my mom had given it to after she abandoned my older sister on the side of the road. This man did not treat the dog well, and the dog still gets scared before eating to this day. So while I was home alone, the man comes up the driveway and knocks on the door. I gave the 1-minute gesture and then grabbed the dog, literally had to carry her because she hates stairs, and my janky flip phone, and locked myself in the upstairs bedroom to call my dad while freaking out and then calling the cops and getting mad at them because I was 13 and scared and alone. My mom once shouted my name when I was home alone. She was in another country, it was midnight, and I live in a 7-bedroom house. I hate when there's a random noise in the house, like a door slamming shut, and the unsettling feeling of not being alone when you've already checked if everyone's gone. I was babysitting a kid who had a video monitor and was told that she wouldn't wake up while the parents were out, and if she did, to call them right away. I was watching TV with the monitor set off to the side to keep an eye on her, and right around 11, the camera's view shifted a few inches. It then began to slightly jiggle like someone was messing with it. I was squinting at it trying to decide what I was actually seeing, and I kid you not, the whole screen burst to static for a few seconds, and the kid started wailing. She stood up and was screaming in her crib just like one of the kids from The Sims. When she didn't fall back asleep after a few minutes, I called mom and she said okay, we're on our way home anyway. We think she has nightmares sometimes, it's fine. Never again. Someone attempting to break in. I have a 75-pound boxer and have never seen anyone run as fast as that man did. A couple years back I woke up at 3 a.m. to see someone walk past my bedroom door. I called out and I'd just woken up, not thinking haze, thinking maybe my boyfriend had come over while I was sleeping, but got no response, so knew it wasn't him. Got out of bed, stupidly forgetting to take my phone or any kind of defensive item with me, and went into the front room where the light was on to be met with a random guy staring at one of the walls. I asked him who he was and got no answer. At this point I had actually woken up enough to realize I could really be in trouble, so ran back to the bedroom, grabbed my phone and ran outside on the phone to the police, who showed up within a few minutes. Turns out the guy was mentally ill, and to this day neither myself or the police know how he got in. Was home with my infant twin daughters who were sound asleep. I was watching TV in the lower level of my tri-level home. On that level, the windows look out to the backyard, and as I got up to go to the kitchen, something caught my attention. What looks like a pale left arm is being subtly illuminated outside in the far right window, maybe 6 inches away from the window. It had angled straight down as if to steadying itself. My heart sunk. Then I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. I ran up the few stairs to the main floor and grabbed my phone and returned to see if it was still there. Nope. Nothing. I've never been remotely shaken like I was then. Called the non-emergency police, and when they arrived, walked to the backyard with the officers but didn't find anything. They were great and kept saying calling them was the right thing to do. It's what we're here for, etc. Don't know what it was, but the image is seared into my memory. I woke up at 4 a.m. because of the screaming on TV. They were showing Twilight and Bella was giving birth. Truly terrifying experience. I had a choking scare when I was like 11 and I was home alone and watching TV while eating Skittles. I like to put a bunch in my mouth and make like a Skittle ball that I would chew on. Something on the show I was watching made me laugh and I swallowed the ball and it got lodged in my throat. I then experienced a few seconds of sheer terror because I realized that there was nobody here to help me at all and I was probably gonna die. Then I remembered some cartoon or something where someone jammed their stomach on a chair and got something unstuck from their throat. So, I lunged at the corner of the recliner as hard as I could with my stomach and it actually worked and popped the small ball out. It was super lucky because I really had no idea what I was doing, but one of the worst feelings I have ever experienced. Definitely never ate Skittles that way again after that. My dad dropped me off at home after bringing my sister to a party and I walked into a CD blaring super loud on our big old-fashioned speakers. The CD was super hot when I took it out, so it had to have been playing for a long time. But I hadn't heard it going when we left. Turns out my sister had left the CD in and then while we were gone there was a tiny power outage that made the music start again. Kinda silly, but all that was going through my head was, my favorite band is really gonna be the soundtrack to my death. Nice. I moved into our house a month before my husband did and I was painting our guest room with the windows wide open. I was busy painting, listening to music when I realized it had gotten dark outside. I heard the leaves crunching outside but didn't think anything of it because we have a lot of neighbors who walk their dogs. When I went to close the windows I saw a man standing in my backyard under the tree maybe 5 feet from our back door staring up at me. I fell to the floor and realized the back glass door was probably open and nothing but the screen, which he could have easily just walked into my house. Crawled to my phone and called my husband, who then called 911 while rushing home to me. We have a 6 feet tall fence around our yard. This person hopped it to watch me. I couldn't sleep right at night for months. This was when I was kid home alone. I usually move around a lot while I sleep. I woke up and hadn't moved. I thought it was cool, it would be super easy to make my bed. I grabbed the bedding, moved it back a little before tossing in place. There was something black sticking out. I tossed the bedding back further. There was a massive black wasp in my bed. An inch from where I was sleeping. Buzzing loud, pissed off. I put the bedding back on and proceeded to try and crush it until the buzzing stopped. I grew up on a farm, bugs usually don't bother me. But I checked my bed for weeks after that. 13th of November, 1981, I was 15 at the time. I was at home with the cat, my parents were out with friends and the house shook and the lights and electrics went out. They came home a couple of hours later to find me under dining room table with the cat and all the lights out. Father, Why are you sitting in the dark? Me. The house shook and the lights went out. Father. Oh, there was a bomb in Wimbledon, 6 miles away. By the IRA. Me. Didn't you think to check I was okay? Father. Well, we weren't hurt, so you should have been okay. I was terrified. I've been involved in bomb scares before but never experienced one going off, and if the house shook from a bomb 6 miles away it was big. I've only experienced something like that one other time, thank goodness, when the Buncefield oil storage exploded in 2005. That was probably a worse explosion because it happened 40 miles from my home and yet it still shook the walls. It woke my husband with a start, who thought for a moment he was back in the army, and my father, asleep in his own home that night, slept through it. The neighbor's dog being hit by a car, because of the sudden sound of screeching tire, bang, loud yelp/scream, then guy screaming no at the top of his lungs, followed by a chorus of screaming and crying. By the time I got to the window they were carrying him away. It was really, really sad, and just hearing such a guttural scream of grief from someone in the middle of the night was terrifying in itself and still haunts me. Poor family and dog. When I was like 9, my parents were both at work one day and I was chilling at home by myself when the intercom rang. We lived in an apartment block. It was some lady asking if I've ordered a pizza. I calmly told her that I didn't. Then she said, "Oh. Well, do you want a free pizza? Just let me in and I'll give it to you." 9-year-old me was terrified by this. Not because I found the idea of free pizza particularly scary, but because my dad used to tell me really drastic cautionary tales for why I shouldn't open the door to strangers, and other stuff. So I was genuinely convinced that the woman wanted to come in so she could murder me. 2 Jehovah's Witnesses just walked into my bungalow and started being aggressive and pushy about their beliefs. I think they thought that because I was young and used a wheelchair I would be an easy target. They only left when I threatened to call the police. I woke up on the couch after a night of not good sleep. I looked onto our counter and thought I saw my brother's decapitated head on the counter. I was terrified, but turns out it was a watermelon. Was playing Xbox on my home theater setup. 100-inch projector screen, surround sound, the whole shebang. Mind you, I had the headset on with the game audio, so I turned the volume of the surround sound receiver completely off. Just me, big screen in a dark room. Was thunderstorming outside, me playing some COD. Next thing you know everything goes black, power goes out. That's when I went pale. Well, when the power went out and reset, so did the surround sound receiver. Who would have known at reset it would turn it back on full blast white noise? Pitch black room, surround sound white noise on full blast. Full blast. Crazy loud. I couldn't process what was happening. I thought I just got struck by lightning. I had a really bad sinus infection once. Couldn't clear my system out for a week or more. Decided to try generic Mucinex. I lost 3 days. I came to, standing in the middle of my studio apartment staring at the wall. I could barely remember anything. Just felt like I was a passenger in my body, kind of. I had worked all 3 of those days. Piloted public transport, cooked, translated stuff, used knives. All in this weird fugue state. When I came to, I spent a good hour at 3 in the morning trying to figure out what happened, what caused it. The only thing I had done differently was trying to clear up sinus infection with the meds, poured those right in the toilet, and it never happened again. It was terrifying for me. The pure and utter confusion. The front door of my apartment complex is broken, so anyone can walk in. People keep trying to open my front door or looking no windows. It creeps me out. Landlord will probably fix it this week and I can't wait. Not supernatural or anything, just a timely coincidence. Last October I found a Ouija board in Goodwill. Brought it home. A few days later I was home by myself and threw what the heck I mess around with it. So I sat down on the floor, and I'm not even joking when I say this. As soon as I said, "Is there someone here?" the power went out. Like a week later found out wind had knocked down a power line. Not gonna lie, I pissed my pants from fear. My ex-boyfriend showed up in front of my apartment and texted me he was there because he wanted to talk. I told him I wasn't home. Thankfully it was during the day so I had no lights on, and he called me a liar. He stayed outside for nearly an hour until he gave up and drove off. I stayed in my bathroom the entire time while on the phone with my best friend. Looking back, I should have called the cops, but I was a scared 17-year-old. I took in a friend's cat that she did not want and I thought was being mistreated. My first cat. I was living alone for the first time in a very long time, so I was uneasy for about the first year. One night I heard a horrifying scream and went from sound asleep to standing next to the bed. I have no memory of moving. I jumped up so quickly. It was my cat hollering at another cat walking across the backyard. Scared me to death. When I was 9, I was staying home alone. It was early morning. I had just gotten out of the shower and brushed my teeth. I put on my favorite outfit, set up a little area in the living room with my drink and a snack and turned on the TV to watch. The phone rang. I went across the house to answer. The voice on the other end was familiar and very comforting. He asked about my day so far and made small talk. After a minute or so he said, "I like your outfit. Is pink your favorite color?" I replied, "Oh, thank you. No, it isn't. What were you planning on watching on TV?" It took me a few seconds to understand what was happening, as I was only 9 and very naive. The voice on the other end of the phone changed. It became deep and raspy and horrific. The voice then proceeded to describe my rape and murder in graphic detail. I went numb, my skin felt as if it were on fire, my heart was racing. I had never been more terrified in my entire life. I slammed the phone down and called my mom at work. I tried to explain what had happened, and I'm sure I wasn't making much sense. She got onto me for answering the phone and told me to go back about my day. I remember trying to explain that he was watching me. He told me what I had been doing. He told me what I was wearing. I mentioned that I was going to call 911 because I needed help. That isn't necessary. I'm not coming home. Just don't answer the phone and go watch TV. I hung up. I was confused. I was scared. I could feel eyes on me. I pulled the curtains closed. I raced around the house and was torn between doing what I felt was right and doing what I had been told by my mother. This whole time the phone was ringing. The second it would stop, it would start again. The sound of the phone ringing would pulse through my tiny body like electricity and practically paralyze me. I was frozen and on fire at the same time. I waited for a pause in ringing and called 911. "I'm home by myself and I'm 9 and someone is watching me and he is going to kill me." She tried to keep me calm. She told me she would send help. I remember standing there, listening to this kind voice trying to help me, but I could feel every horror movie scenario playing out behind me. Was he creeping up behind me with a knife? Was he going to shoot me through a window? Was he going to throw a rock through the glass and open the door? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my body, but I was also overly aware of my skin. In a moment of panic I set off the alarm to the house and ran outside. I remember this sense of relief, but also this overwhelming feeling of having a separation in my reality. The house felt small and dark and dangerous and cold. Outside felt open, safe and warm. I could hear lawnmowers, birds chirping. It was a beautiful break from the bone-chilling feeling of the phone. It was like I was watching a movie and I could see myself experiencing both of these environments at the same time. A neighbor was pushing his child in a swing. He was concerned. He let me stand next to him and he protected me. I could hear the sirens. The blaring sound getting louder as they grew closer. It felt like it took an eternity, but the police arrived. He walked over to me and asked me what happened. I did my best to explain, but so many of the words the voice on the phone used were embarrassing. I couldn't bring myself to say such adult words to a police officer. His other words were bone-chilling. I couldn't say those either. I can still hear my young voice repeating he was watching me. He said he's going to kill me. Not long after, my mom's car pulled into the driveway. She, for some reason, decided to come home. She didn't look for me or come speak to me. She calmly got out and walked over to a police officer. I was standing in the doorway from the house to the garage, facing the driveway. I could see my mom, the police officer. I was watching, trying to understand, trying to figure out what was happening. And then I saw it. Her laughter. She was laughing. My face was swollen from tears. My heart was still racing. My skin was on fire. And my mom was laughing? I slowly crept closer and overheard, "I'm so sorry about this. She just got scared being home alone and overreacted. What is happening? What did I do wrong? Did I imagine this? Was this a dream? Should I not have called 911? Did I overreact?" My memory of what happened after that is hazy. I remember refusing to stay home alone, the sound of the phone ringing rippling through my body. It wasn't something I liked discussing. I refused to repeat what had been said to me by the voice on the phone. My mom decided she knew who did it. She didn't even know the details. There was no investigation. No one was questioned. She told me it was a boy my age who lived across the street. I knew it was impossible. And no matter how much I protested, I was always told it was him. Many years later, after I was an adult with children, we were at Christmas. Everyone was in the living room and I had gone into a back bedroom to change a diaper. As I was walking out of the room and back into the living room, I could hear my mom laughing, her voice as if she had been telling a joke. The faces of everyone in the room told a different story. Discomfort, anguish, shock, fear, yet, she was still laughing. It felt as if I was walking in slow motion. One of my older children stopped me from entering the living room and sort of pushed me back into the room I had just come out of. She just told the story of you being home alone and the man threatening to kill you. She told it like it was a joke. Like a funny story from your childhood. I never learned who it had really been. I deal with my fear of ringing phones and phone conversations on a daily basis. My parents own a business on the same property as their house, but separate from their house. Like, one building is obviously the shop, and the other is clearly a private residence with a fence, gate, etc. I was 13, home alone, and coming out of the basement with laundry. Walk into the dining room to start folding, and there's a man standing there looking around. I yell at him about what the hell he thinks he's doing. What the hell does he want? Get out of my house, what have you? Mind you, my parents' dining room is far back in the house. You have to walk through the whole rest of the lower level of the house to get there, and this fucker didn't once stop and be like, "Oh, I shouldn't be here." No. Walked right in like he owned the place. He says he's a customer here to pick up an order. I yell at him that the shop closed hours ago. Get out of my house, start screaming at him like a banshee on roids and basically shove him out by force of volume alone. He skedaddled to his car and left, and I told my parents what happened when they came home. He seriously called the next day and tried to play at my dad about my nasty attitude and my awful language. My dad cut him off and said he was lucky I didn't just stab him. He's now banned from the premises, and his order will be shipped to him after payment is received. For once, my dad took my side, and that cleared any doubt in my mind that I might have overreacted. Lol. I was paranoid for months after that. It was insane. My roommates were out of town and my dog started growling in the middle of the night at something at the end of a dark hallway. She never behaved like that, so I was genuinely freaked out. Then I started hearing noises coming from my kitchen on the other side of the house. I was fully convinced someone was in there, so like any idiot in a movie I got a flashlight and a weapon and went to investigate. As soon as the flashlight hit the kitchen area, something freaked out and knocked a bunch of SHD over. I was terrified, and then my flashlight hit the culprit. A huge raccoon had snuck through the doggy door and was eating my dog's food in the kitchen. We made eye contact and it immediately fled outside. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.